"I've served with Kinran before, it won't be a problem," I said with a smile. It was a pretty fair warning. The Kinran would startle anyone who wasn't used to them, and some who were. It always felt like they shouldn't be able to move the way that they do. They're a perfect case for why you shouldn't judge solely on appearance, because the majority of them were very polite and shy. As a matter of fact, a Kinran commander was a novelty. In a way, it made sense, because they could file paperwork faster than most commanders could. Their compound eyes and 10 arms made it a breeze for them. Unfortunately, their personality often conflicted with the duties of command, namely, telling people what to do when they don't want to do it, and disciplinary action. You also don't see them in soldier positions. Even though they could field more weaponry, the thought of taking another's life was often too much for them. Blinus nodded and ushered me inside. Nixt was sitting behind a circular desk designed to make the most of his limbs. The station master gestured for me to sit, and Blinus left us to talk. "Hello, shiphead Yulina. Nice to meet you in person," he said. "The feeling is mutual, Station Master Nixt," I said, wondering how he was going to broach the subject at hand. "Let's talk about the aliens." That was blunt. "Yes," I said. "First, the ship is called the USS Thanatos, and it is a carrier." "A carrier of what?" he asked. "A carrier of other spacefaring vessels, specifically 10 frigates. They also consider it to be their diplomatic vessel." "10 frigates?" he asked. His limbs and mandibles twitched nervously. That was the only way you could tell that a Kinran was shocked, aside from their voice. They don't have eyelids or eyebrows to raise. You also couldn't tell where they were looking because they were looking everywhere. Compound eyes. "Yes, they come in peace, though. Their war vessels are much more terrifying," I said, remembering what I had seen. "I take it they are a very advanced race?" Nixt said. "Races. There are multiple. The second thing is that they represent another galactic governing entity known as the United Systems." "There's another republic?" His limbs twitched even more frequently. "I'm not sure if the U.S. is a republic or not. I know they have multiple governing agencies, one of which is called the Directorate. They run the military. One of the directors is aboard the Thanatos and will be handling first contact," I said, knowing what the reaction would be. "Their military handles their first contact?" he asked in a shrill voice. I was going to give this poor Kinran heart failure. "Yes, but they have good reason for that. Their side of the galaxy is a little bit harsher than ours, and they've had to fight for survival very hard. I assure you that they come in peace, and if we play our cards right, they'll help us with the Omni Union. They've already begun planning an invasion of OU space." He held up 8 of his limbs to stop me. Okay, hold on. Before you continue, I want you to know that I brought you up here to ask you for a favor." "What would that be?" I asked with a genuine confusion. "First contact protocol dictates that any meetings done with aliens must involve a Republic diplomat and whoever governs the system that the meeting takes place in. Meaning, me?" He paused. "I am a Kinran, and we're known for our off-putting appearance and timid nature. The exact opposite of what you want in a diplomat." I nodded my understanding. "The thing is, there is a provision that exempts Kinran from this duty for that reason, so the duty falls to whomever I elect it to. I want you to do it," Nixt said as he gestured to me with 2 limbs. "I'm not in your chain of command, Station Master," I said. "I know, and I would have my intel head do it, but I want her on scanners just in case something terrible happens. I've already cleared it with the diplomatic corps. Since you're not under my command, I'm asking rather than telling, though." He twiddled his limbs nervously. "Yeah. Okay, I'll do it. They already know me quite well, so it shouldn't be a problem," I said, consigned to my fate. I never ever in all of my life wanted to be a diplomat. "Thank you." He jumped forward and shook my hand. I managed to suppress my natural reaction at this and shook his grasper. As he took his seat again, he said, Good. The diplomat will be here in 2 days. Should we quarantine part of the station and grant the aliens access?" "The Thanatos has very good amenities and is well stocked. They'll likely decline an invitation to the station. They want a truce as much as we need one, and less can go wrong if they remain aboard their ship. Still, it wouldn't be a bad idea to extend an invitation to show peaceful intentions. They know how freaked out we are by their tech and ways." Nixt nodded and said, "Gotcha. All right, we'll extend an invitation and see. Also, Command wants a full report from you as soon as possible. They're willing to forego a full debrief in light of the present circumstances, but they still need their paperwork. Understood. I'll do it as soon as I can. Nixt gave me the unnerving Kinran equivalent of a smile. So, shiphead, tell me about what happened. All right. We were sent to investigate some warp fluctuations. I began my tale. My first command, and I'm already behind enemy lines in what has to be the worst detail a captain can get. Scouting. I had no experience in scouting. Before I made captain, I had served aboard the USS Nidhogg, which hardly ever does anything. And before that, I had station duty. I hadn't seen any sort of action, let alone action behind enemy lines. The worst part was that the assignment was to the ship. I got dragged along for the ride because someone in charge decided it would be funny to have Captain Neal command the USS Armstrong. Thanks to our last name, everyone in our family was familiar with the first man on the moon. When I had first got the orders, I cringed when I saw the ship's name. Thankfully, the crew is competent and the Armstrong is rigged for the job. We have several types of sensors that allow us to get a fairly detailed view on a system without having to be anywhere near it. Our orders are to exit warp in dark space, scan a system, and move on unless we see something that requires further investigation. We've effectively censused 18 systems in the 2 days we've been at it. The stress of the assignment had begun to get to me. 4 out of the 18 had the Omni-Union ships we'd heard about, and 2 of those had weird warp fluctuations that would have ripped us to shreds if we had jumped into the system. Thankfully, we were far enough away that they didn't detect us, or if they did, they decided not to do anything about it. Bubkiss in this one too, Captain, Lieutenant Lee said. We'll hopefully see that a lot, I replied. Well, I, for one, am hoping we find something exciting soon. Lee grinned at me. I grabbed the bridge of my nose to demonstrate my exasperation. Lieutenant Lee, our task is to map out the enemy territory to the best of our ability. It's not to go sightseeing. If we see something interesting, that's probably going to be a bad thing. Yes, sir, she replied in a playfully dejected way. I knew that Lee knew why we were out here and how important the mission was. I also knew that Lee could tell how stressed I was about being able to perform said mission, which is why she was being playful. If she could tell, so could other members of the bridge crew. Her playful banter was a way of cheering me up and warning me that my mask of authority was slipping. I double-checked the findings and saw nothing. Bubkiss it is, I said. All right, on to the next system. I watched the slight increase in activity amongst my crew as they prepared the warp. Omega had given us specific systems to check based on the incoming trajectory of the fleet that had attacked Sol, so there weren't a lot of calculations to do. I didn't really know what to think of Omega. I was fairly familiar with him because he interacts with the Nidhogg a lot. Every time we had a conversation, he had appeared as a Grim Reaper, a very old personification of mortality. Honestly, it was in bad taste. He doesn't have a body, and as far as I know, he can't die. It almost seemed like a taunt, but I got the feeling that he just thought it was cool. Or maybe it's symbolism, because he was designed to take out the other AI when they went rogue. I guess it could be because he's their personification of death. Still, he probably just does it because he thinks it looks cool. A slight lurch from the ship as we exited warp at our destination brought me back to reality. I watched as our scanners examined the system in question. 4 planets, a yellow sun, and a bunch of wreckage. Several debris fields worth. One of the planets was in the habitable zone and appeared as if it had vegetation. I took another look at the debris fields. What the hell? I asked no one in particular. Sir, began Lieutenant Junior Grade Flowers, we have several debris fields and a planet that has signs of civilization. We've also got warp fluctuations, but they're weird. Weird how? There are a bunch of them, as if there are a lot of different sources, he responded. 18. No, 19 total. Well, that would suggest that the enemy is amassing here, I said as I sat forward. Lee looked at me. No enemy contacts, no ships at all except for the broken up ones in the debris fields. I think we're looking at the remnants of a fight. I looked back at the readings. She was right. There wasn't a single functioning ship in the space of this system. There weren't even any signs of functional satellites or stations. For a moment I wondered about cloaking technology, but then I thought better of it. We've got every type of scanner. You can do a lot of things to look invisible to a lot of different scanners, but you can't do all of them at once. We've tried. It was Flower's turn to look at me. Sir, I suggest we get a closer look. I can't quite pinpoint what is causing the warp fluctuations. If we could get scans of it, it could prove invaluable. Plus, we've been told to try to get detailed scans of any inhabited planets we come across, just in case it's their homeworld. If they even have one. I frowned slightly. Take us in as far as we need to go. Don't answer any hails and stay away from the debris fields. I've heard they might have nasty surprises. Lee had received the same briefing I had and grimaced. Nuclear and antimatter mines were nasty. Our shields should be able to withstand a few, but any more than that, and we would be dead. There would be no rescue. Our calls for aid would take a long time to reach U.S. space, and they likely wouldn't be willing to send a team. Whatever situation we reported could have changed drastically, and we're in enemy territory. I looked around and saw the grim faces of a bridge crew who had realized the same thing. We approached the system on thrust. As we got nearer, we could make out that the debris were from multiple ships of multiple types. It looked more and more like Lieutenant Lee was right about there having been a fight. There were also bits of stray ordnance and the traps that we had been warned about. Sir, I've reconstructed a cruiser and it matches the OU ship profile, Flower said. Good work. Definitely avoid the debris fields, I ordered. I waited and waited as our ship grew closer and closer. I watched as we first entered the warp fluctuations, then the system itself. Okay, that should be close enough, Flowers, I said. Let's see what we can see and get out of here. We were now close enough to pick up bodies on the sensors. No emissions of any kind. All dead, floating aimlessly in space. I turned my attention to the scans of the planet. We were close enough for a visual, but I wish we weren't. Destruction was everywhere. Buildings were burned out and blown to pieces. Corpses, both organic and robotic, littered the streets, or rather what was left of the streets. It had been a long time since the U.S. had performed orbital bombardments, but we had seen them in training. I recognized these scenes as the aftermath. My eyes widened as I realized that it was the same no matter where I looked. Cities, towns, fields, stretches of wilderness. The orbital bombardment had been indiscriminate. The bastards had surrounded the planet and bombed it to oblivion. I zoomed in on part of a city to get a better look at the dead. That was a mistake. The organics were humanoid with tentacles on their faces. Rot had only just begun to set in, confirming that this had happened somewhat recently. Men, women, and children were strewn across the landscape. Most were missing portions of their bodies or were scattered everywhere. I stopped on one that was intact with its eyes open. They were jet black. I wondered if they were like that when they were alive. Then I noticed that the alien I was looking at hadn't died from the orbital bombardment. It was still relatively in one piece, and its wound looked like one from an energy weapon. Lying next to it was what appeared to be a rifle of some sort. I panned over to one of the robots. It was lying face down, and next to it was a different type of rifle. They had been fighting each other. The orbital bombardment must have been preceded by an invasion. But then, where are the winners? I was baffled until a horrible thought occurred to me. Xenocide. The bombardment and invasion had been to exterminate, not to conquer. I couldn't help but express my horror with a small sound. I looked up and realized that everyone else was looking at the same thing and coming to the same conclusion. A war of extinction. Something that had been avoided at all cost in our history. We had even forgiven the baby-eaters, the Duluran, to avoid having one over our heads. This was the horror we had avoided. How can something live with itself knowing that it's done this? I felt myself involuntarily gag as I realized that my ancestors very nearly did something as atrocious as what I was looking at. I felt an immense shame as I realized that I might be related to something that said yes during the Duluran vote. Even the children. What kind of sick, demented fuckwit would ever think that this was okay, that it was justified? Only comfy, cozy, fat fuck politicians who never bled a day in their life would be okay with this. That and sick fucks who need an entire team of therapists to even hope to be normal. I saved the data. When we got back, I would make sure Omega got this. I'll beg him to never let us do this. I'll give anything to be able to be certain that we never turn into the lowly creatures that would kill children just for the sake of winning a war. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, and a sniff from the bridge crew reminded me where I was. I wiped my tear and looked up. We all know what we're seeing here. We know it in our hearts, and our hearts are screaming at us that it's wrong. And it is. Those that did this will be punished. We will punish them with all of our might, and we will make them regret this. Even if they can't regret now, we will teach them. I slammed my clenched fist into my armrest. We will pound it into them. I stood up. We nearly did this to the Deluran, but even back then more than half of us knew it was wrong. We will save this data and return it to the United Systems. The near half of us that voted yes will see what it is they were voting for. Until then, back to work. Flowers, have you turned up anything? Yes, sir. The warp fluctuations are coming from machinery, he responded, wiping his face. I sat back down. Any idea how it works? No, I'm not an engineer, sir, but I've scanned it thoroughly enough that we should be able to extrapolate schematics. Sir, Lee interrupted, what about Earth? My blood ran cold. The current population of Earth was 312 billion. They wouldn't go down without a fight, but that many people. We'll give them the best chance we can. I want detailed scans of everything. Extrapolate enemy ship profiles and armament, I said as I looked back at the screen. We will do everything in our power to make sure this doesn't happen again. Sir, by the time a message with this much data reaches Sol, the assault will likely have taken place. The only way we'll be able to get this intel back to them would be to abandon our current mission and return to Sol with the data, Flowers said. I looked at our list of systems. 4 left. If we had more left than that, I would say to abandon the mission and return to Sol with haste. But 4 will only take a few more hours if we're fast about it. Technically, we were supposed to continue scouting based on our own readings after we finished with these systems. I think Command will forgive us, though. There's no way they're expecting the enemy to be xenocidal. They're probably thinking that the system will be occupied by enemy forces and the occupants will be enslaved until we take the system back. Hell, they might chew me out for finishing the mandatory part of the mission. That's what I'll hope for, at least. Okay, we'll finish the census and make speed back to Sol. How are the readings coming along? I asked. We'll have them done momentarily, should we? Flowers paused for a moment. Should we do something about the planet? There's nothing we can do, I said with grim finality. We can't accept any hails, and if we start hailing and the enemy is still down there, we're compromised. If there are any survivors, at least they're on their home planet. Air to breathe and food to eat. There's not much more we can do for them than that. Aye, sir, Flowers said. I turned back to the images of the planet's surface. I had been nervous about fighting the enemy before. Scared, even. Now I can't imagine anything I want more than to eradicate them from our universe. The rage that welled up inside me quickly overtook the sadness and horror I had been feeling. The only thing that pissed me off more than what they'd done was that I couldn't make them suffer for what they'd done. I ran a quick tally simulation on the data from the planet. The estimate came to 32 billion. Damn. Anything over 20 billion is usually a homeworld for a spacefaring species. I silently hoped they had colonies out there somewhere, but doubted it. Humanity hadn't begun extra-system colonization until we had hit around 50 billion people on Earth. By then, we had multiple habitats on Mars, Titan, and Luna as well. The New News and the Gaunt had followed a similar path. The Alumari were an outlier because they were insectoid. I double-checked our scans. There were no other signs of habitation in this system. It was extremely unlikely that these people had extra-system colonies, because they didn't even have intersystem colonies. I turned my attention to our extrapolations of their ship schematics. They had been fairly advanced, too. The enemy fleet must have been massive. Captain, we've finished the scans of the wreckage. We're good to go, sir, Lee said. Roger, let's move on then. Next system as fast as we can manage, I ordered. The next system contained nothing of note. The one after that contained a small fleet of OU vessels and a few uninhabited planets. They didn't notice us. The third system contained a larger fleet, but still no inhabited planets. We double-checked to make sure that there weren't any ships that didn't match what we had scanned. There weren't, so we moved on to the fourth and final system. As the ship jostled slightly from the exit of warp, I felt that something was wrong. I don't know if I had caught a glimpse of the scanners out of the corner of my eye or if it was some sort of sixth sense. Maybe I had felt the tension that suddenly emanated from the crew that was monitoring the sensors. "What is it?" I asked urgently. "Sir, there's an absolutely massive amount of OU ships in this system, and 5 planets with signs of habitation," Flowers said with a hint of fear in his voice. "Do they see us?" Flowers was silent for a few moments. "Lieutenant Junior Grade Flowers, do they see us?" I asked louder. No, sir, they don't appear to have noticed our presence," he finally answered. "Good. Let's get what we need and go to Sol. Quickly, people," I ordered. The crew set about their tasks with gusto. We got profiles for each ship. There were around 3,500 ships. We compared the profiles to what we had on record. They had battleships, cruisers, frigates, destroyers, and corvettes. The corvettes that matched our profiles were the warp disruptor ships. They were inactive. The ones that didn't match the profiles looked like lightly armed shuttles. Light transport ships, most likely. There was only one of the big types that didn't match our profiles. It also didn't seem to match the designs of their other ships very much. It looked fatter than the other ships, bloated even, as if one of their battleships were in the final stages of a pregnancy. Kind of like when you compare our battleship ships to our carriers, I said. "I think so too, sir." "There are 10 of them," Lee said. "What about the planets?" I asked. "We can't get close enough for a detailed scan, but there are extensive signs of habitation on 5 of them. 3 out of the 5 would not suit organic life," Flowers responded. "What does that mean?" "Well, sir, one of the planets is extremely toxic. Another doesn't have a readable atmosphere. The third is a frozen planet that has parts of it reaching true zero. Also, the OU are not attacking these habitats," Flowers said. "So it's likely the robots are responsible for the habitats?" I asked with amazement. "Yes, sir, but we're not able to get a definite read on the structures," Flowers said. "Also, there appear to be space stations that are manufacturing new ships. I'm counting 12. This was huge. 5 colonized planets that the machines weren't attacking, a fleet of 3,500 ships. And on top of all that, shipyards. Even if this isn't their home system, destroying it will definitely set them back. It was unlikely they would let it go without a fight, though. I remembered the briefing. 250 million enemy ships. If they all converged here, we would need to use the dreadnought. The Marines aren't going to be happy that they won't get to put boots on the ground. "All right, everyone. Finish up the intel gathering," I said. "Let's get back to Sol." "The diplomat's ship arrived a while ago, you know," Lena said. "Well, it wouldn't be the government if we weren't kept waiting," Kryn replied. We had been waiting 3 days for the diplomat to arrive. It was a nervous wait for me because the last thing I ever wanted to be was a diplomat. It's far too complicated. Trying to appease all of the different cultures of all of the different species while simultaneously trying to milk them for all they're worth seems like a lot more work than being shot at and shooting back. I could barely keep track of who was angry at who and why on my own crew, let alone the entire galaxy. And now we're dealing with what someone could easily mistake as an alliance of warrior races. I sincerely hoped that they had sent someone extremely competent. Director 3 seemed pretty reasonable, but we shouldn't press our luck. Most of my crew had taken the shore leave that Station Master Nixt had offered, but Kryn, Lena, and I remained aboard the Loalana. I was far too nervous to have any fun, and my bridge officers had decided that I needed company. Kron was still in medbay relearning his motor skills. It was coming along nicely, and he should be able to return to duty any day now. I wondered who I should make my new second, or if one would simply be assigned to me. "Shiphead Yulina, the diplomat is here and waiting for you. Come meet us in my office, please," Station Master Nixt said over the comm. "Understood, on my way," I replied. I shrugged at Kryn and Lena. They returned the gesture. I got up and started to exit the ship. Along the way, I passed the engineering team that was handling the repairs. They'd had to order parts for the FTLD, which had arrived before the diplomat. Now they were working feverishly to complete the repairs. They assured me that they would be done by the end of the day today, and I was inclined to believe them. I passed a few of my crew on the way to Nixt's office, giving them a wave which they returned. I had written letters to the families informing them of the passing of their loved ones, and our dead had been sent off. I found myself hoping that they had found some peace as I knocked on the door to the station master's office. "Come in." Nixt's muffled voice came through the door. I entered and saw Nixt sitting in his chair. A Wurakari in the diplomatic corps uniform was sitting across from him. As they turned, my jaw nearly dropped off my face in shock. "Hey, Yulina, long time no see," Yuluni said. My mother had written to me a while ago letting me know that my sister had become a politician. I had thought at the time that she had meant that Yuluni had become a mayor of some colony city. The diplomatic corps was a very high-ranking position in a politician's career, and most diplomats eventually become senators. I was very surprised to see that my sister had become an ambassador so quickly. I cursed myself for not writing my mother more often. "Hi, Yuluni. This is a surprise," I said after swallowing a couple of times. "I can tell," she laughed. "I haven't seen you in, 13, 14 years? "Yeah, since I entered officer school," I said. "Nobody would be able to tell we were siblings at a glance. My scales were brown and green and hers were purple and blue. I was a good 4 inches taller than her and she was far thinner than I. The only way that you could tell without being told is the Yule family syllable in our names. But even then you'd assume we were cousins, not siblings born 2 days apart from one another. I was older, of course. So, tell me about the aliens. How's their temperament?" she asked in a professional manner while simultaneously maintaining her joyful demeanor. "Creepy. Right, yeah, they are friendly enough. My crew and I would be dead without their help. They fed us, treated our injured, and even repaired the majority of the damage to our ship." "Wait, did they scan our tech?" she asked with alarm. "No, they intentionally left our faster-than-light drive in its damaged state to avoid doing exactly that. Not that learning about our FTLD would have helped them much," I said with a shrug. "Right. Says here they're more advanced than we are." More advanced is an understatement. They are able to precision warp in system during a ship-to-ship battle. Our FTLD would have gone critical if we had even so much as tried that, I said, gesturing for emphasis. And their weapons are eons ahead of ours as well. They were very clear that they want us to know that they do not want a fight, and a fight would be very bad for us. "Okay. Well, if they don't want a fight, then what do they want from us?" she asked. "I don't know for certain. That's why you're here," I said with a bit of sarcasm. Nixt laughed a little. "Indeed. They've been waiting for 3 days. We really should get things moving, Ambassador Yuluni. Are you ready for contact?" My sister sighed. "As ready as I'll ever be." Nixt hit a button on his desk and we all waited in silence for the Thanatos to answer the hail. "This is Captain Reynolds of the USS Thanatos. How can I help you, Station Master?" "Hello, Captain Reynolds. Our diplomat, Ambassador Yuluni, has arrived. We're ready for the first contact meeting whenever you are," Nixt responded. "Excellent. I'll let Director 3 know and he'll get back to you in a little bit. Ambassador Yuluni, huh? Are they related to shiphead Yulina by any chance?" Reynolds said with a chuckle, implying that he was joking. Nixt held up his mandibles in a smile. "Yes, actually, she's his sister." "And we're both sitting right here, Captain Reynolds," I warned him. I hadn't got a chance to know Reynolds all that much, but humans seem to have a crass sense of humor at the most inappropriate of times, also a keen sense of perception. Hello, shiphead. Hope you're doing well. How's the repairs coming along?" "They're nearly finished. The engineers told me they'd be done by the end of the day." "Good to hear. Anyways, Director 3 just messaged me saying he's ready to take over the call. I'm going to transfer you now," Reynolds said. A ping came from the comm indicating a new call had connected. "This is Director 3 of the United Systems," came the distorted voice of the man in armor. "Hello, Director 3. This is Station Master Nixt. Our diplomat has arrived. You'll be meeting with shiphead Yulina and Ambassador Yuluni," Nixt explained. "Understood. Can we meet aboard the station?" Interrupted Yuluni. "We wouldn't typically want to meet on something that is armed. This station has defensive weaponry." "I'm aware," said Director 3. The weaponry aboard the station consists of 4 50mm chain guns and 2 guided missile launchers, correct? All three of us looked at each other with wide eyes. Then Uluni and I looked at Station Master Nixt questioningly. Yes, he replied, that's correct. Then that will work for us. Not to offend you, but such light armaments are not a concern to us.